Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Howard Falco is an author, spiritual teacher, and mental strength coach to college and professional athletes. His insights on the power of the human mind have produced groundbreaking positive results in thousands of people over the last 20 years. He has published several books on self awareness and inner power, including his latest book, Invincible: The Mindset of Infinite Potential and the Secret to Inevitable Success. Howard works using this power and what he calls next level mindfulness with college and professional athletes and coaches in almost every sport, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, NCAA Football, and the Olympics. His past clients include Canada's PGA Tour golfer Nick Taylor, England's LPGA Tour golfer Mel Reid, China Korn Ferry Tour player Carl Yuan, Major League Baseball ace pitcher Chris Archer of the Tampa Bay Rays, and all-star third baseman and 8-year veteran Evan Longoria. Holy smokes! He spent an entire season as the mental coach for the Arizona State University football team, where his work involved the process of coaching mindfulness and the true power of belief, and facilitated one of their best seasons in 20 years. Oh my goodness, Howard Falco! What an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Casey. Really great to be here.
It's an honor to host you. Yeah, I stumbled through the introduction because I'm so upset about that last part. I live here in the Salt Lake Valley. I'm a diehard Utah Utes fan, and I don't want anybody trying to make the Arizona State football team any better. That's terrible.
Gotcha. I understand that. You guys have been solid for years, though. Yeah.
Had a bad year last year.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Not a great year. Right. Not a great year last year, but yeah, we have been solid for a while, and now we're in a new conference, and last year didn't really go to plan. But yeah, working with Arizona State is akin to saying you're working with BYU to us. So we developed quite the rivalry with Arizona State over the years.
We'll X that out of the bio.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing, you said you work with the NHL as well, and you do live in Phoenix, correct?
Yeah, I live in Phoenix, Scottsdale area. Yeah.
Were you much of a fan of the Coyotes?
I was a fan. It was really upsetting when they left to become what'll hopefully end up being the Utah Yetis. I'd love to see that name get taken on by them. But yeah, I was definitely a fan, and did a little work in the NHL with a couple players. But yeah, it's disappointing that we don't have the team anymore.
Yeah, definitely. It's been an amazing year for us here in the Salt Lake Valley. I've been able to go to more NHL games this year than I have in my entire life combined as a lifelong hockey fan. It's been an absolute blessing, and they're playing really well. But I really got a sense, like when we learned that we were acquiring the team, I started listening to podcasts about the Coyotes from Arizona, and you got a sense of like the true fans were just getting hosed in Arizona, and it felt so bad for them that they were losing the team. They were diehard fans, and yeah, the team wasn't great and weren't treated the best and didn't have the best facilities, but the fans ended up losing out on that one. So definitely understand that.
Yep, no question about it. And hopefully the other sports that we have can step up, although that's been a little bit rocky out here for a while now.
So, yeah, that's a good point. And not to bust your bubble, but Yeti has already been eliminated due to trademark infringements with Yeti coolers. They tried to work that one out legally, and it didn't go well.
Yeah,
they tried. They were really proactive about it, and that's been axed already. So the main front runner as of now is the Utah Mammoth, which isn't terrible, but everybody liked Yeti a lot better. So, but that's out.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it is. Oh man. Well, you were kind enough to send me your book Invincible, which I am quite enjoying. You did a really good job writing it. It's very practical for somebody like me. I feel like I talk about this stuff, I read about this stuff enough to know it in my head, but definitely not enough to really embody it in myself. And even in preparation for this conversation, like I feel a level of inadequacy, and I'm surrounded myself with notes that I take in about your book because I feel like I'm not going to know what to talk about or what questions to ask. And I'm sure that's something you get all the time, that like, I get it. I know what you're saying, and the power of the mind and self-belief and all this stuff, but to actually truly embody it, it just never really feels like it sinks in for me.
Well, let's start by rephrasing that. It hasn't yet. And never is a past, present, and future word, right? And it's a sneaky way the ego tries to hold the hand up on transformation and change, because change can feel like a four-letter word. And so the ego protects the known space of where a human being has been and what they've experienced. But the minute that you have a strong enough will to experience something different, you start to look at the way you're speaking your story and saying things about yourself, and you start to entertain maybe a different way of looking at who you are, which really brings it, as you so profoundly said, from the head to the heart, where you embody it. Because embodying it means connecting the intellectual understanding of this information with a heart and a soul that says, now I get it, now I know, now I understand. So it just hasn't happened yet, but that can happen at any moment. And it takes a ready and willing soul to experience it and then open up to what's going to come next for you because of that, in terms of any area of your life that you're looking to have results or success in.
Mm, very well said. I really like adding that yet component as well. And yeah, your book makes me want to go through this process and make it a focus of mine again and again. The steps that you outline in the 3 different sections of your book is really, really helpful. Before we dive into the content of the book, I do want to ask you, how did you get into all this stuff? And I'm assuming you weren't born a spiritual leader, as we described in the introduction. How did all that come about?
So I'm going to give you the very short story, but you're welcome to ask any question about it, because we could be here for hours on this one. Always very curious as a kid, had a lot of questions about life, existence, some of the existential questions. It was sparked in a profound moment. The first time I went away from, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I was taken on a camping trip near the Canadian border with my aunt and uncle and my cousin. We got up there, it was dark. We had a cabin on the lake. We unpacked our stuff. I walked out the cabin door, went to the end of the dock, stared into the lake, and was just blown away by, I've never heard the sound of silence before. Excuse the oxymoron, but that was really incredible. And then as I looked out into this lake, I saw what looked like lights shining up on one part of the lake. Then I looked and they were shining up on another part. And then I realized they were across the whole entire lake. And I had no idea what I was looking at, Casey. And then I looked up. When I looked up, I could not believe what I was seeing in the sky above me, the amount of stars. And it blew my mind in the best of ways and sparked a whole bunch of new questions for me. So I went on this journey when I got back from the trip. My mind was so open to trying to understand what all that means in terms of us and what we're doing here and our place in the universe. So these were big questions. It all led, as my life went on, to an experience in my 30s where I was married. I was working in the finance business. Things were going well. I had 2 kids, but yet I didn't have that sense of inner peace. And I was trying to find it and understand what it was. And I thought it was a checklist of items that you would check off. Okay, you do this, you get married, you get a job, you get a house, et cetera, et cetera. And the last thing on the list was millions of dollars. And one day I just realized, it like hit me like a ton of bricks, that I had been working with all these people in the finance industry who had more money than they would spend in a lifetime or lifetimes. And they weren't happy, a lot of them. And that blew me away, because that was the last thing I thought was my answer to happiness. And then I realized that's not the answer either. So I was out of answers. Threw my hands up and said, life, universe, reality, God, however you connect, I need to understand more about how this works, or I don't know how I'm going to go on. That's how bad I needed to understand the insight and understandings to life. And 2 weeks later, I was in a seminar. I read a psychology book on how to trade the markets. I thought it was fascinating from a psychological perspective. I'm in this seminar with 20 other people, and the instructor is talking about how you're creating the whole experience by what vehicle you get in, how long, how your gain or loss, how much money you put in, etc. You're creating the whole experience. And something hit me, Casey, in that moment about this idea that happiness wasn't something on the outside that we attain that makes us happy. It's a perspective and an understanding on the inside. And so finally, I had a door and a window in what was formerly a doorless and windowless room on how I achieve happiness or a different state of being. And I was so excited about this and this understanding. I didn't know how to get my arms around it yet, but I knew, okay, it's in me. I got to figure this out now. And the second thing I realized was that I had asked these deep questions to life, looking for insight. And here in this seminar was actually life talking to me. I actually connected those dots. And I thought, wow, this is how it works in life. When we're curious and we're open, life will bring us the right people, places, and events to get us the awareness we need to move us to whatever creative next level we're looking to get to. And that could be searching for existential questions on the universe, or it could be getting to the next level in golf, or or whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish, or our relationships, etc. And so that blew me away. And then I went into life every day in this very mindful state, saying, where's the insight going to come from? I was very open, I was very present. And over the next 6 months, information started to flow in faster and faster until I had almost an unspeakable experience 6 months after that, that revealed so much insight on life and so much understanding that it brought me to my knees in a state of humility I'll never forget. And I knew in that moment, Casey, that my life had changed and that I was no longer going to do what I was doing in the finance business. I left that work and started to write about what I experienced on how life works for each one of us, how we connect and how we create with life. And I Am got published by a major publisher. I started teaching and speaking. Athletes started calling saying, hey, this insight helped me expand my identity and my results. Do you work with athletes? It was a natural for me. I grew up playing all sports. So I started working with athletes. I was already working with individuals, helping them with life. So that's the short story of how this all came into be. It was a massive insight and understanding and expansion of mind.
Mm.
But what's cool about it, last thing I'll just say about this is that what I realize is that this information, this insight on life is available to each one of us when we're ready. We get this information, we get this insight if we're present enough to see it coming into our awareness. You know, maybe a little bit of this podcast is maybe it's just a tiny piece of that for somebody who's listening now. But that's the exciting thing. It's not for anybody who goes and sits, studies theology or goes to spirituality, learns about spirituality or goes to India. It's for anybody.
Mm. That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that. With your experience working with professional athletes, I'll just relate this to two recent sporting events. Last night, my beloved Utah Hockey Club got smoked by the Oilers, 7-1. And, we're trying to make a playoff push and we're right on the edge. Like you can see the team coming together. They're very young, but you come up against like a truly elite team and they got smoked. Also recently, the season opener for Formula One just happened, and you've got the 20 best drivers in the world, and 10 different cars. So you have a direct comparison, one person to the other, and the difference between two drivers on the same team is completely different. So I was curious, with all of your work that you've had with professional athletes, what is the difference in the mentality and mindset between somebody who is very, very, very good and somebody who is elite?
At the very core, the major difference is in how they look at who they are, the vision that they have of themselves that they know to be true. And this isn't a thinking, there isn't doubt in this. It's just a simple knowing. And because there's this knowing, there's this peace in them about what they're doing. And because there's this peace and this clarity, there's an openness to the possibilities, a greater sense of intuition and instinct, which allows that driver to be fractionally faster on every lap because they're just seeing things from a greater perspective and they're lining up more with the truth of who they are authentically. Where the other driver may not have that level of belief. They got something close, but it's just not quite that level. And because of that, the vision may be just a little more constrained than the other driver, which means the corners aren't as tight, the acceleration isn't as smooth, and those fractions of a second show up on the board.
Yeah, that's very well explained. You mentioned the first book that you wrote, I Am. I believe you've written 3 books now, including your most recent book. Can you tell us about the overall premise of the latest book that you've just written?
So I Am was about total self-awareness. Time in a Bottle is how time works in your life as it relates to what you create. So those books went out, and then I did over 20 years of work in the field and still am doing it with individuals, teams, coaches, athletes, and individuals going through every mental health issue in life. So I thought, why not take this incredible amount of work that I've done and all the successes I've had, all the magic that's happened, and give the formula away of awareness to how people can achieve what I've termed that invincible state of mind, where they have such a great understanding of the nature of life, how it connects to them. They have an understanding of their own identity and how to expand on that identity. They have an understanding of how to break through any limiting beliefs. They have an understanding of how to shape the narrative of their life, harnessing the power of I Am in the process, and then directing who they want to become every day while they go through life and deal with life and all of its ups and downs. So I wanted to empower somebody with the highest level of mind possible, as I say, the level of a Zen master. for life in whatever they're trying to accomplish and do, because it brings a sense of peace and harmony and joy and creative expression and fulfillment and a patience while you're in the process.
Mm. Yeah, well said. The way you wrote the book, like I said earlier, is very practical and really understandable. I really like the parts where you're having a conversation with a client and going back and forth. As you mentioned off air, it's kind of a conglomeration of all the different conversations you've had in your career, but it's very relatable and practical, which I really like. You've got some amazing poems in there as well, and you broke it down into three different kind of sections with different chapters in there. Can you just kind of do an overview of some of those three kind of sections, and then we can deep dive into each one?
Yeah. So part one, the most important part as you start this process of coming to the invincible mindset is self-awareness. You have to understand who you are. There's a quote in the book, it's a Druidic axiom, which says, if you seek to understand the whole universe, you will understand nothing. But if you seek to understand yourself, you will understand the whole universe. So self-awareness is truly the path to the expansion of mind. So that's part one. Once you get through self-awareness and you see more of your worth, now you've moved into breakthrough. And in breakthrough, you can start to harness the power of intention, the power of I am, the power of creating and envisioning who you want to be, because now you're grounded in some authentic belief based on the work you did in self-awareness. And then once you get through breakthrough and you start to create this new version of you, as at a higher level, you get to part three, which is next level mindfulness. And next level mindfulness is about going out in the world and living this then practically, and how to deal with all the ups and downs of life, all of its negativity that can come at you, because the world's not going to change just because you changed. You just have to be able to go into the world and accept and deal with it in a way of a master at a mastery level in order to stay in that invincible mindset. And then, of course, the last step, step 8, is how to live from that invincible state of mind. And that gets into the very deep concepts of overcoming fear, the value of faith, and really living to this highest level of self-acceptance, love, joy, peace, and the creative expression that that brings for you and the results that that brings into your life, the richness of the results.
Wow. Let's go back to part one then and talk about self-awareness. I was not like most people, like we have to figure this out for ourselves, right? And for me, this was reading the book The Untethered Soul about a decade ago. And as he comes out, as one of the very first sentences of the book is, you have a voice in your head and that voice isn't you. And I just have always talked about that being like a 2x4 to my face. I've never considered that we've got something talking in our heads constantly. It's usually not very positive, but at least mine isn't. Tell us, what are some of the steps to be aware of ourselves when there seems to be so much noise within ourselves?
Well, first of all, that noise comes from somewhere, and it comes from a belief or an identity in who you are that was constructed unconsciously. And what I mean by unconsciously is it came from your nurturing, first 6, 7, 8 years of your life, and what you learned watching other people, or how long you cried in the crib, or when you were fed, etc. It gave your soul kind of this idea of where your fear and faith lied in life in terms of what you had to do to survive on an unconscious or subconscious level. Then you had your personal experiences in life where you went out in the world and with friends, girls, with boys, with sports, and how that all affected the identity of who you are. And then there's a real sneaky part of this, which is genetics, which carries some of our social expression and ways of dealing with the world and thinking, because it's not just eye color, hair color, and skin color that come through genetics from hundreds of years past. And this forms an identity. And that identity then connects to your ego, which the ego is designed to take your identity and make it real in life. And it starts to give you thoughts and feelings and ideas about yourself, which creates some of these voices. But the turning point in life comes when you finally realize that any negative thought or idea that you have about yourself, or these thoughts that pop up that keep you from getting to where you want to go, may not serve you any longer. And so the book helps you to understand how to dig into these, dissolve these old beliefs, and replace them with some new ideas of who you are that's grounded in the truth that's offered in the book about what you came here to do, what you can be. In other words, we're all creative beings with unlimited expression. Everybody has that same birthright. So you start to go through these limiting beliefs and you start to work on dissolving them and changing them as you see that they don't serve you in your intention of what you're trying to create. Great athletes don't let those thoughts affect them. People that are successful in business or relationships or walking with peace in life don't let negative thoughts affect them. They've learned how to replace them with a truth. There's a quote in the book. It says, any thought that causes you suffering or limits you in any way is a lie or stems from a lie. And I think that's a big part of the transformation piece in this book, is realizing that those thoughts are not true. They've been a misunderstanding of what you thought about yourself by the development of your entire being in this life since you were born. And it's not your fault because you didn't know any different. Because if, there's an old saying, if you could have done better, you would have. But now you know that you have the ability to take control of the programming of your mind and the way you think about yourself, and you can begin to change that. It'll be uncomfortable at first because it's going to be different, but you can start to change that. And the more you work on it, the more the neural connections in your mind start to change, the more comfortable it gets. And eventually it starts to slip into your subconscious and become true to you, where you don't have to think about it anymore. Now you're just being it. And that is transformation.
Wow.
But this is a process. And so many, we have the mental health crisis going on, which is massive in the world right now. Anxiety, depression, and it's at epic levels. And I know this to be true, that this works. This ability to self-reflect, contemplate, take ownership over how you decide to see who you are is magical. And I believe it's the next evolution in human consciousness, is self-understanding and self-awareness.
Well, I love that. Just still another thought experiment on that note from The Untethered Soul. In one of the chapters, he says to ask yourself the question, who are you? And you start by saying, well, my name's Casey. I'm 41. It's like, well, you were 40. You're going to be 42 eventually. And are you just a jumble of letters? And then you say like, oh, I played hockey and all this stuff. And it's like, well, that's what you did. That's not what you are. And you eventually end up at like finding yourself. But I'm just curious, like, is there a particular technique? Like, how practically do people do this? Are we talking about a meditation practice, a stillness practice, a journaling practice? Are any of those relevant or favorable for discovering who we are?
All of them are. But you're already doing it, Casey. I mean, you're in the middle of a discussion, a deep dive into this because of the inquiry. And so many people are doing the same thing. They're curious about how this all works. And the information, the universe is so divine and exact, it starts to meet you with where that gap in awareness is and starts to help change it for you. So yes, tools are helpful. Contemplating the information is helpful. Writing down I have a creed in the book towards the end where it helps you set a new set of values for who you are going forward in the world that you can read every morning to set you on your path so you stay on the right track. Because your mind, the old beliefs do not die easily. The ego is going to try and protect those and keep those alive because it thinks it represents your existence until there's enough energy in your intention to become a new version of yourself, until you're tired enough of living the lies and the pain and the suffering. It's just worn you out. And then finally, you'll say, that's it. This is who I'm going to be from this day forward. And I'm not going to listen to the old beliefs, no matter how true I've thought them to be most of my life. I realized that they never were true. I believed them and experienced them to be true, but they were never true from a universal perspective, because a universal perspective is only trying to reveal my perfection. And I know that's a huge concept to offer, but that is the journey we're all on, to see the perfection of our moment by moment learning and unfolding. We are all doing the best we can at each moment. That doesn't mean we don't have to go through stuff, deal with karma, deal with consequence, but we are all acting in each moment out of the best of our ability. And the more we have information like this or other work out in the world like this to help us understand more of the truth of who we are and who we can be, the more it's going to help us transform and change.
Well, you mentioned ego, and I know that's something you write about quite a bit in the book. And it's such a double-edged sword. The ego can be something, again, like you mentioned, something that's reflecting negative thoughts around us. But it sounds like what you're describing by reframing things and not listening to the negative thoughts and reinforcing them with more positive thoughts. This is a way that you can use what you already have, your ego, and make it work for you and work with you rather than working against you.
Exactly. The ego's designed to help us validate our existence, to take what we believe to be true and make it real. I'm a mental strength coach. I'm an author. I write, I go out and do sessions with people. I teach, I speak, I do the things that help validate who I am. I'm a father. If one of my kids called, they're not kids anymore, but if they need help or something, my ego is going to kick into gear to help them, to validate who I am. And if I can't get to them and they're in trouble, my ego is going to go into high alert mode, into major active mode to try and, climb canyons and whatever I need to do to get to my kids, because that's how strong that belief is in me. So the ego is trying to help you experience who you believe you are. The question is, who do you believe you are? Because that's what it's going to help validate. And you believe you're no good or you're not worthy. Guess what the ego is going to find for you? All the conditions to help you validate that. That's why step 4 is so important on dissolving limiting beliefs, because once you reprogram that and you dissolve the old things that have limited you and you start to program with new beliefs about who you are, the ego goes out to collect that and to give you the experience of that. So let's get practical for a second. Let's say there's a golfer and he's in a tournament and he's coming down the stretch and he's contending, where before he was highly nervous, didn't feel right. His hands didn't feel right as he was maybe coming down 17, and he knew, all he has to do is hold on or make another birdie or stay in the hunt. And he's just too nervous. And so because the belief is not strong enough in who he is in that moment to dominate the space and the energy of that moment, then the negative beliefs start taking over, because the ego knows what this will represent if there's success in this moment. And if that doesn't coincide with the truth that person's holding about themselves and the belief of what they can do, that right hand's coming way over the top. That ball's going to get yanked into the bunker on the left, and it's going to be an impossible up and down. And they give away a shot, and the next thing you know, they finish third or fourth. And once again, no championship, no completion, no move to the next level. So it's really important that a person step into this belief in who they are. And so I teach athletes how to step into that space and own it and say, this is who I am. This is what I want. This is where I want to be. And this is where I'm as comfortable. And then the next time they get in that situation and they remember that, they're sitting over the ball and they're like, this is exactly where I want to be. And I'm as relaxed as I am puring shots on the range right now. This 9-iron, I'm stuffing this thing in there right now. I can feel it. Let me take a deep breath. I got my line, I got my target, and then there's a butter smooth swing. They look up and that ball's just sailing right at the pin. Easy little 2-putt, or maybe they drop another birdie to finish. And it's just a much more comfortable experience because there's alignment with the identity.
Mm.
Giving away
Man,
all the secrets here.
this is good stuff, man. I love it. If I would have met you a few years ago, I probably wouldn't have quit golf. I quit golf for exactly that reason. Okay, so it's an interesting, to me, kind of a paradox, because this obviously is a process. What you're describing as far as like dismantling these negative self-beliefs, the self-limitations. It sounds like it's a process that is pretty much always ongoing, but it also seems like it's always accessible right now in this moment. And so as you work with people, is it something that some people grasp instantaneously and they get it and they can plug and play in their life and have benefit? Or how long can this process take for people to you don't arrive? I don't know if I'm phrasing that
Oh,
correctly, but you
that's
know
a
what I mean? Like,
great
it always
question.
seems like it's there in front of you if you want it, but it's also the process at the same time.
It's a great question. Every single individual has free will over time and how they process it. Some, it can take a while. They can take it in slow bites and steps. Other people, immediately it hits them and they go, I cannot believe I've had this power at my feet the whole time. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for the change. I'm ready to leave the old way of thinking behind me. And boom, there's immediate transformation. And then there's a whole bunch of people that are in the middle. So every human being is different based on how much unlimited joy, success, how much they can accept their infinite nature. Let's put it that way, because it's our nature to have boundaries and fight for a certain known space that we can live in, because infinity is scary. It can be, that I can do anything. It's almost too much responsibility for a lot of people. But that's where the greats live. They live in that space of complete, unlimited, infinite potential.
Mm. That's a great segue to the second section of your book where you talk about the breakthrough. Is that what you are referring to when you write about the breakthrough?
Well, breakthrough is when you finally have taken the cap off potential and you now know it's infinite. So now you know, because not only do you know it's infinite, but you know that you're worthy of whatever you want to move towards. And that's what gives you the power to be able to move through into step 5 and 6, which is in breakthrough, where you learn how to embrace self-respect, self-honor, self-love, self-appreciation. And you learn how important that is to the feeling of worthiness. There's 3 poisons in the mind that can really hurt us. It's guilt, shame, and regret. And they are poisons. And so once you realize how to remove that poison, you still keep the responsibility, keep the awareness. Obviously, everybody has to deal with consequence and karma, but you free yourself of the feeling of not being worthy. Then you're in breakthrough. And in breakthrough, you can start to harness the power of I am, which is the way you construct a new identity for yourself. And you start to go out and test it and to live it and to see how much you can embody this new idea of who you are. And if not, instead of making excuses or denying why something didn't happen, why a relationship didn't work out, why a sporting event or an athletic performance didn't work out, you start to just simply look at it like, okay, it didn't work out because I need to learn more about the conditions that will make it work out. So you start to get curious and you start to absorb more of the information. And again, that's what the great athletes do. They're like human sponges for insight, information, what can get them to the next level. And that has been my experience working with some of these top performing athletes.
Mm.
They know
Wow.
it's only an accretion of information because they have the belief and the knowing that they're going to get there. All they need is the awareness on how to do it. And so they're just accumulating awareness at that point. They're not fighting themselves anymore.
Mm. You mentioned those poisons of the brain, and I've heard you on a recent interview give a really practical example of this, of somebody who is trying to get into a relationship after having cheated on a previous relationship. Can you share that story with us and make that kind of more practical and relatable?
So the story, it's actually in the book. It's one of the quote conversations with a client where they were looking for love in their life and they had a bad breakup of a marriage because they cheated. And they kept this feeling of guilt and shame and regret in their mind. And they weren't having success with future relationships. And what I helped them discover was that holding an identity that says, I am guilty, I am shameful, and I am regretful does absolutely nothing to help them create what they want. As a matter of fact, it hinders them and causes the ego to go out and create another experience where they feel shameful, guilty, regretful. And that could be in a relationship. It can be in sports. It can, they can go have some losses and financially or in gambling. Who knows where they'll get the feeling, but the ego's job is to get you to that feeling. So by forgiving themselves, understanding they did the best they could at that moment, there's no other truth than that. I don't care how they want to fight it with, well, woulda, coulda, shoulda, which is, our lies. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, our lies. It's only what you did. They can finally heal themselves and move on because you're never who you were. You're only who you decide to be right now. And that's the power we each have. Now, I want to be clear saying I no longer feel guilty, shameful, or regretful about something I did, because I'm not condoning cheating in any relationship whatsoever. There's consequence and karma to that. But to carry it forward does not help with what you're trying to create now. And it doesn't condone what you did. And that person may not want to talk to you for several more years or decade, who knows? Um, and that's part of their choice. And you have to understand that because of what happened. But that doesn't mean you have to carry the pain and suffering any longer, which is causing you loneliness. You can finally see a new version of yourself that's learned from that experience, that knows how to respect a relationship, that knows how to respect yourself. And you can finally make peace with it and heal that guilt, shame, and regret. And that's truly a transformational moment.
Well, you used a few I am statements, which again is the name of your first book. How can we use that phrase I am? How can we use that more to our advantage?
Well, just to understand that is the most single powerful creative statement you can make as it relates to how you identify with who you are, which dictates all your thoughts, your perceptions, your energy, and how you go out into the world. So that's how important that statement I am is. And just how you can use it is to understand how you have looked at yourself. Be vulnerable. Take a look at how you have, do you believe you're beautiful? Can you write I am beautiful? No, I am ugly. Is that what you've said? Okay. Have you said I'm worthy? No, my dad told me I was unworthy and I really don't feel that worthy. And that's why I'm staying in this position and haven't really been actively seeking an additional or a next level, position in what I'm trying to accomplish. So it helps you to identify the programming that's brought you to this point in life, but it also shows you the opportunity of how you can use that statement going forward to program who you want to be. And again, it is a process where you start to write these statements down that should feel uncomfortable and out of body at first. But then as you start to work on healing yourself and seeing more of your beauty and your perfection and your worth, I know these are big concepts, but that's really what self-awareness is about, is like truly seeing what you have the potential to become. Then you can line up with these I am statements, give them power. And here's another magical and mystical thing I've learned about life is that it's not only the way we think that dictates our energy and what gets created. Somehow, this divine universe knows what we believe to be true and is constantly meeting us to help fulfill that creation of who we are. And so, the minute you shift that, the tides and the winds and the forces of gravity, everything starts to move behind the scenes to help build the conditions to help shape a new experience for you. So life is always working with you. You have to be patient. You have to have faith. You have to be humble and learn, realize where the gap is in your awareness for what you need to learn. But if you can do that and trust the process as you go through it, I I mean, I can't even tell you. I mean, I did tell you in the book how many times, magic things have happened because of it. So it's an exciting process. And I'm so excited to deliver this in Invincible.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful sentiment that again I wish would sink in more for me. And again, I'm really excited to go through this process. And
Well, I so again, all I'm pointing out is how sneaky the ego is. I wish it would sink in for me. The ego's already
yeah,
got the hand up. It's trying to prevent it. I'm excited about how it's starting to sink in for me. How about that statement?
better. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
But you
I like
see
that a
how
lot
the
better.
narrative tries to keep you in the old? It's a really sneaky thing. And that's why mindfulness, true mindfulness, next level mindfulness, and becoming aware of the ego and what it's the story it's telling you, you can start to go, whoa, what did I just say? Wow, I'm going to switch that. I don't have to adopt that I'm fully doing it yet if I'm not, but I can say I'm becoming better at this. That's a middle ground, right? Anyway, I just thought I'd use that as a real
Thank
time
you. Yeah,
example.
much better rephrase. I
Yeah,
love that. Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's great. So what is next level mindfulness?
Next level mindfulness is truly that sense of awareness where you start to become a witness to who you are and how you're reacting and what your thoughts are and how you're perceiving the world to see if it serves you in what you're trying to create. If you're trying to create peace in your mind, does it serve you to look at the world and say, oh my God, the world sucks, this is horrible, everything is terrible and getting worse? And I'm not saying that's not partially true. There's a lot of bad things going on in the world. There's also a million beautiful, amazing souls doing incredible work and demonstrating love and joy every day. And the more you open to that, the more you'll start to experience more of that. The other stuff will still be there, but it will not rob your mind of its state and its ability to put joy and goodness and positivity and results into your life if you have that old perception. So that's just one example of how true mindfulness or next level mindfulness, you can say, you know what? I'm going to take a more expanded view of things. I'm not just going to look at things as completely bad. I'm going to look at both sides. I'm going to move my energy towards the good and the positive, both in life and in myself. And I'm going to start to work from that space every day. While I understand what's going on in the world, while I want to see change, but it's not going to rob me of my state of mind, my energy, the energy I am with my family or my friends. I'm going to start to take dominion over how I feel about myself in life. And I don't want to connect an expectation, but when that shifts, it's amazing how the conditions of your life start to shift.
Um, well said. You're describing a little bit of what I got into during the pandemic when you're getting into the news cycle and you're hearing about all these terrible things that are happening in, case counts in northern India. And like you get worked up about all these things that, studying stoicism at the time, you realize this is so far outside of my control. When I go on a walk, like the lake is just the lake and the birds are still there and like everything is growing and just going as it is. Like to get out of the news cycle, especially of all those things that you can't control, I think can be very, very helpful. It definitely helped my mental state.
There's no doubt that media, depending on the channel and what their intent is, um, can be highly manipulative in terms of trying to put a narrative by the way they produce news that can grab your mind for a reason, for an intention, for an outcome. So by taking dominion over your mind, it doesn't mean you're ignorant to what's going on in the world. You know that we went through, a 100-year pandemic. You know that there's certain things we have to choose what we're going to do to help, by what the world offers us, and we can take or not take based on, what we want to do to help protect ourselves. So you're not staying ignorant with your head in the sand. You're aware of what's going on in the world, but you don't let that be produced to you. You don't let that manipulate you. You take the information in, you understand what it is, you stay in your place of gratitude, and you decide who you want to be in relationship to it. That's commanding the invincible state of mind. That's
Mm.
not letting anybody else dominate your thinking. For so many years in my life, I gave so much credit to so many people that I thought were smarter and knew better. And some gave great information, but most people had no clue. And I had to unlearn things that I was told or learned from people in order to get to a higher truth and understanding of what works in the world. So it's really important to keep an open mind on what works best for you and to come from a place of faith versus fear. Because if you let fear dominate your mind, that will destroy you and it will keep you from your best creative self. Because there's been a lot of programmed fear recently that has gotten into people's heads and given them a completely skewed narrative on things, and it's been awful. But so it's even more important to learn how to own and take control of your own mind, take a more grand and open perspective on what the world is, and the goodness that's in it, and that most people have good hearts and are looking to do good things in the world, and some aren't, and to really understand that.
Write quite a bit about overcoming challenges. And I'll relate this to another post that I made as the pandemic was starting that, people were getting worried and worried about their immune system. And I made the point that like, look, as trainers, as nutrition coaches, we've been telling you like you need to be strong for this. You need to expose yourself to temperatures and you need to do the workouts and you need to eat correctly. And there's all these things that we've been beating the drum about for many, many years before the pandemic ever happened. And now it's like you kind of had wish you had done that because now there's something really challenging that you're going to have to deal with. And if you hadn't built those tools over time, you're going to maybe struggle a little bit more than if you hadn't. And so I'm just wondering, this sounds like something that needs to be put into practice when we need to be practicing this all the time, not just at times when we're facing adversity. We need to be practicing this all the time, even when things are a little bit more calm. Is that the best way to think about that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual's intent on what they want. If someone really wants longevity and wants to focus on health and wellness, yes, you're 100% correct. For other people, it's not as big of a focus in their life, eating food they like or being with family or culture, that becomes what's important to them. And it's just not as important. And, there's consequences for that. Maybe not. It's up to them and their lifestyle and how their body reacts to that. So everybody has a different intention. But if your intention is for wellness, then yeah, the protocols of so many people that study wellness, nutrition, and what's great for the body to help deal with anything that the world can throw at it is helpful. There's also the other side of things, and not that we should rely on modern medicine to solve everything. I think that's been a huge problem, is that people just do what they want and then they hope that modern medicine gives them a pill to solve it all. Which, again, people that go into healthcare, and I know a lot of people in healthcare, they're wired for serving people and helping them. And so they go into healthcare to do the best they can to do that. Are there a few nefarious pharmaceutical companies out? Probably, but of the thousands and thousands that are out there, it's probably a tiny percentage of them. Others are built on efficacy and helping people feel better in life. But the pendulum swings too far sometimes to where it's too much a heavy dose on that. And that's why there's been this boom in wellness and nutrition and naturopaths and where people are finding what has worked thousands of years ago in Chinese medicine is the same that works for us today. So there's different modalities. What I hate to see sometimes is people blanket an entire industry when there's thousands of good people doing great work. It's about what works for you and what's best for you. And each individual is different on that. Obviously, the best path is to be prepared, to be in shape, to do the work, to eat healthy. And my feeling on my bias is to have the most powerful mindset you can, because my belief is that everything originates and stems from mind. And we haven't even gotten into yet the power that the mind has over healing, right? That's a whole nother podcast and a whole nother book probably. But I've seen how it works in terms of creating reality for results and experience. Why wouldn't wellness be a part of that as well? So that's also a big component. And I think the best, certainly for mental health.
Yeah, I love that.
It's huge.
Very well said. Couldn't agree more about the system. I haven't met many doctors, healthcare workers that didn't have the absolute best intentions of what they're doing. So I love that you made that point and couldn't agree more. I did what you told me not to do in the introduction, which is don't skip ahead. I skipped ahead and read the last chapter, which I really love. We can save that. We can save that for the reader. I want people to go out and get this book because, again, it's been super helpful. As we say to anybody on the show, if you ever say the word boundless, I'll send you a $20 check. You have it in a quote in the very end of the book. And I love the way you concluded the book. And like I said, we could leave that for the reader. What makes you the most proud of this book as you're looking back and what you've created here? What makes you feel very, very proud?
I've dedicated my life to this. I feel more graced and humbled. It's beyond words how humbling this is to be able to present this insight in the way that I do. What makes me proud is that I really completely squeezed my soul to get every ounce of me into Invincible, and what has worked for so many hundreds and hundreds of people over 20 years of doing this work. And, from athletes at the top level experiencing championships to individuals just finally getting some relief in their life and living a more happy and peaceful life. So what makes me proud is that I've put it together in the best formula and step-by-step version I possibly could. And I'm so excited to get this into people's hands and to start talking about it more and helping them get to where they want to go on this journey. Kind of like a lighthouse that, there's a ship in some choppy waters. You shine the light for a little bit, offer this information, and hopefully they're on their way to smoother sailing. So I'm very proud of that.
Great answer. Okay, to my chagrin, I do want to ask you about the experience of working with an entire team, the Arizona State football team. I'm wondering what that process was like, what challenges you had, and if there was any stories that really come to mind with that process. I'm sure there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears going through that process with young kids, young athletes dealing with tremendous amounts of pressure. Can you comment on what that experience was like?
So I had the opportunity. It was an unbelievable, great football team in 2014 at Arizona State. So cerebral, so amazingly interested in this insight and information. I started with the special teams unit. Two of those guys are still in the NFL, if you can believe that.
Wow, cool.
Zane Gonzalez and Matt Hawk, who's punting, and one's a kicker for Washington. So that's kind of cool and very rare. But then the work kind of gravitated from the special teams unit to the offense and defense. And it was great. These guys were really open to it and wanted to learn. And they loved this idea that there was an independent party they could talk to and share how they were feeling and learn more about the power that was inside them. The great story is in the book, which is the week I worked with backup quarterback Mike Bercovici. We started working together, and then Taylor Kelly, 23-game winner at that time, went down with a leg injury, and Bercovici had to step up. And the work that we did was on infinite possibility, dealing with adversity. And that happened to be the week he was going to USC to play the Trojans in the Coliseum, about 15 miles from where he lived. So to say he was intent on winning this game, they were just coming off a loss on ESPN against UCLA, a big loss where he actually threw for over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. But the defense gave up like 62 that game. So going into USC, they wanted to bounce back. And again, the work that we did was on infinite possibility and how to embrace that and to be ready for adversity, to be ready to bounce back. Mike was a very intense player, a huge motivator, and just a great guy and athlete. And they were down by a couple scores with 2 minutes to go. He throws a strike down the sidelines to Cam Smith for like 70 yards. The defense holds. They get the ball back with 50 some seconds on their own 20 some yard line. He throws a quick pass across the middle or quick incompletion. Then there's like 20 seconds left. He throws a quick pass over the middle to like the 50-yard line to Gary Chambers. And then there's 7 seconds left. He runs up and spikes the ball. There's no time on the clock. Comes out of the huddle, takes his arm and winds him like windmills. You know what he's going to do. He drops back to throw, heaves the ball into the night sky, and Jalen Strong out of the dark sky in front of 4 USC defenders jumps up and snatches the ball in the end zone with no time on the clock.
And
they win the game. And it's been known as the Jail Mary. That's the term for it. And the announcer said will go down as one of the greatest plays in Arizona State Sun Devil history. But that was a fun moment that season. So that kind of catapulted the team and charged the team up. And then we started to open up more of this work on mental strength. And they beat Notre Dame that year. We went to the Sun Bowl, beat Duke. It was, an 11-win season, top 20 ranking. It was a big year. But it started with that work and that moment.
what a great story. I love that kind of stuff, man. And I'll tell you what, I will root for Arizona State if you're playing USC any day of the week. we hate those guys even worse. That's absolutely incredible. What a cool thing to be a part of. And like I said, I just love those stories. And yeah, that must have been really transformative for yourself and for all the players that got to work with you in that season.
Yeah, well, amazing. And it was great. Mike's the type of guy that, he had the will to win, and he just absorbed this information and felt like he could go through a brick wall. And to see him take this insight and this power and all the work he's done over the years and then create that moment, it was fun. Yeah.
Super cool. I love that. Okay, so I want to ask you, what is one thing that you would want to leave with a listener from this conversation? And the one thing I'm just going to say is go buy the book. Get the book Invincible. It's really, really good. If you were to leave the listener with a second one thing to think about and leave them with, what would that one thing be?
It's the opening quote in the book. And that is, if you knew how powerful you really are, you would never stop smiling. And that's the invitation to Invincible, is that this understanding and this awareness of how to open up that potential in you to create and experience what you want is there for you. You're worth it. And if you weren't, this wouldn't be coming to you. But it is, because you're worth it. You know it. You know there's more in you. Here's the opportunity to learn and embrace that.
Well, Howard, I am leaving this conversation with a smile. I feel very grateful that I was able to meet you, read through the book, and have this conversation. Selfishly, it's very important to me and my life, and it has meant a lot to be able to chat with you today. And I know it's going to help a lot of people out there. And like I said, the book is really well done. It's very practical. I hope a lot of our listeners go out and grab it, because I think it would be very, very helpful for them. Yeah, I just really appreciate you and all of your hard work. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Thank you so much, Casey. Thank you for your words, and thank you for having me on and for what you do. I appreciate you very much. So thanks. They can connect with my work. I'm on Instagram under Howard Falco. If they want to connect with what I put out on Instagram on a daily basis, they can get the book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and any independent bookstore, which I encourage them to do. And then my websites for my work are howardfalco.com and totalmindsports.com if they want to see some of the stuff I do or connect with me.
Excellent. Well, awesome. We will link to all of that in the show notes. And like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and really, really enjoy your content and feel very grateful that we were able to connect. So thank you again for everything that you do. Thank you for writing the book, and thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. Really, really appreciate you.
Thanks, Casey. Back at you.
Thank you so much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.